All right, there we go. There seems to be a somewhat long-ish delay. Not the biggest deal in the world, but thank you all for joining us. I see Tex is here as always. Got something to talk about with Tex a little bit later on, but just real quick, do this at the beginning of every one of these. So these are the Meatgistics live streams, separate from the Walton's Inc. ones. On the Walton's Inc. ones, either Austin and I or somebody and I usually sit around for 2 hours, have a good time, give away a few things, draw some winners of previous giveaways, and talk sometimes about meat processing and things like that. This is far more targeted. We want to have this for you guys so you can ask questions about specific topics. So I've been trying to keep a post going on Meatgistics with a list of upcoming topics. So if there's something you guys want, you can go find that post over on Meatgistics and recommend it or ask for it, request it. This one was actually from Joe Hell. He wanted to talk about smoke schedules. There's a couple other things I'm going to shoehorn in there that sort of fit along with smoke schedules. But in general, thermal processing, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So any questions you have, put it on in the chat and we will go ahead and get those answered as we go. I'm going to start with actually letting everyone know our good friend Tech77 from, well, where did it go? Is doing something with a KGFA. It is, I will get this posted here in just a second. It is a scholarship fund for Kansas kids. It seems like a really good thing, and they are doing an awesome auction right now to help fund this. So this is a scholarship program awarded to countless deserving high school and college students, gives them funds necessary to pursue their chosen fields. Requirements are graduating Kansas high school senior, but we are going to post the link in the chat to their auction right now. There are a bunch of awesome things on there. I will definitely be going after that shotgun and the painting of the American flag with the silos in front. Those were all awesome. So let me get that in there for you guys. And Papa Sop is here. Nice. Hi, Patty. Hi, David. Hi, Bob. Dennis. Miami, Ohio or Miami, Florida. If you're in Miami, Florida right now, you can watch this later. I would go out and spend whatever time you can at the beach. That would be my thought process, at least. All right, so I've got about 8 or 9 different smoke schedules that I just want to quickly go over with you guys. We're going to talk about some of the differences in between them. But something that goes along with smoke schedules, and it's a big part of almost any of them, is the stall. So I spent some time earlier today doing some research and some writing. So this is going to be far more prepared than something I would normally do. But so to understand what the stall is, we kind of have to understand the structure of a muscle and what is happening while we're cooking it. So muscle tissue is made up of 65 to 75% water. I think we all knew that. And that's before we add anything, before we pump it, before we mix in water with seasoning, anything like that. So muscle fibers are the reason you see a grain in the meat. So when we're cutting jerky and we're cutting it across the grain, what we're trying to do is make those fibers short. If we make them long, they're going to retain their structure and it's going to make it chewy. Now, if you unwrap those strands that you see, you're going to see multiple fascials, the fascial tissue together. That's covering up multiple single muscle strands. So you see that grain, in that or inside that are multiple strands of muscles. It's myofibrils. Then inside that are thousands of things called sarcomeres, and that's what's responsible for the muscle's ability to retract, to be the ability to grab, ability to lift things. Now inside that, there are lots of different proteins, but there are two ones that we're really going to focus on because they're the only two we really care about for this. That's myosin and actin. So not tough actin, tenactin, just myosin and actin. Now to cook, or while we cook, we are going to denature both of these. In certain situations, we want to go ahead and get the myosin to denature, but not the actin. So they form or perform similar, but different functions when they're denatured. The myosin is what is responsible from the meat going with that mushy, pre-cooked texture to that nice, yummy doneness that we're looking for. Actin, and I'm sorry, that happens in between 105 and 120 degrees. Then from 145 to 160-ish is where the actin will start to denature. And that's gonna really accelerate the closer you get to 160. So that actin firms up the meat. So if you ever cooked a steak to 160 degrees, I can't believe that any of our viewers would do that. But if you have, you'll know it has a much, much different texture than a steak cooked rare or medium rare, which is really where you should live as long as it's quality cut of meat. But yeah, if you go to 160, it's gonna really firm up and it's gonna really start to expel water. And that's really the whole thing with the stall. What the stall is it's when your meat won't climb for long periods of time, the temperature won't climb in your smoker. And that is because it has expelled all of its water that is sitting on the surface of the meat, the sausage, whatever, and it's evaporating off into the air. So as it evaporates, it's just like your skin, it's cooling the meat down. So if it matches or sometimes even exceeds the thermal processing energy, you run into what is known as the stall. So what do you do about the stall? There's a couple things you can do. The first, which kind of seems like the most obvious, is just turn up the heat. It's not always the best option. If you turn up the heat too high, you can overly dry and cook the outside, and you end up with what is known as case hardening. Case hardening will then prevent heat from being effectively passed towards the middle of the sausage, which is how sometimes you end up with something that's overdone on the outside and still raw in the middle. More common with like a summer sausage or a larger diameter, but it can happen on snack sticks as well. Another thing you can do is increase the humidity in the smoker. If the air is more moist, it will be more difficult for the water on the surface of the meat to evaporate off. If it can't do that, it can't cool the meat, so you can go right past the stall. This is my preferred method. I would rather do that than increase the temperature of the meat, or temperature of the smoker. The best way I found, the first thing you're gonna want is definitely an oversized water bowl. This is what was the smoke bowl for an older Weston, I think the 30-inch vertical smoker. But it is now my water bowl. I go ahead and I fill this all the way up. I put it on the drip tray of my PK100, which is good. I mean, larger bowl gives it some surface area, but it really is only what, like twice the size of that? So it's not doing a ton. It's better than nothing, absolutely. But what we really want to do is increase that surface area to as much as we can. And the two best ways that we found to do it are sponges, automotive sponges, the big ones that you clean your car with. Put that standing up in the bowl. That sponge, if you ever looked real closely at a sponge, it's just got like little holes and tunnels going all the way through it. All of that is surface area. So the sponge will suck up the water and then let it evaporate off into the air. Great way to do it. We've done it that way for a very long time. Well, 2 years. But the other way that I've started playing with more is this. It's an Aqua Dry chamois. Just picked it up at Walmart. It's like $5. We go ahead and put that, drape it over like this, push it down in the center. This will draw water constantly up like a wick and evaporate it off. I cleared a full bowl of water from this, I think in less than a 4-hour smoke. And when I say clear, I mean it was empty. It had evaporated all of that water off. I was doing snack sticks with it, and those snack sticks turned out absolutely amazing. So go pick yourself up. It's called an Aqua Dry. Yep, Aqua Dry. It's a little chamois material. I think what it's designed for is to go around your neck while you're running, and it keeps you cool. But we use it for this, and it's absolutely awesome. Before we get to those smoke schedules, well, let me just look at chat, see if there's anything crazy. Had stall happen at 135. Yep, absolutely can happen that low. It's a little bit more common, just a little bit higher, because that's when meat's really going to start sweating. But there are lots of things that go into that can factor in. You've got relative humidity of the air outside. You've got heat of the air outside. You've even got what the water content of your product is. So 3 years ago, on one of our summer sausage videos, we actually added 2 quarts of water to a 25-pound batch. It made stuffing like a dream. I literally just barely touched the handle and it would just go. It was absolutely awesome. The casing's stuffed nice and tight. Smoking took forever. I want to say it was approaching 12 hours. And they were only, the 2-inch, 2.4-inch wide casings. That was because there was so much water in there that it just kept pushing itself to the surface, pushing, evaporating off, and it just took forever. I also didn't love the consistency of that summer sausage, if I remember correctly. I mean, it's 3 years ago, but I do remember being like, it could be better. So a little bit less water. I now recommend that people add no more than 1.5 quarts when they're doing summer sausage, snack sticks, anything like that, and that's only if they're using a Sure Gel binder. If you're not using a binder, I'd add a quart max. But yeah, you definitely should be using a binder too. I hope we make that clear. Sure Gel is absolutely gonna help you with any of your cured sausages. If you're doing a fresh sausage and you wanna add a binder, which you definitely can, carrot fiber. Carrot fiber is awesome for fresh sausage. Don't use it it's better than nothing with cured sausage, but you're a little bit working against yourself there. Summer sausage, snack sticks, and I know I say this all the time, but they're semi-dried products. Carrot fiber is going to do its best to hold on to that water. So it's like trying to cook, you want to cook some of it out, but the carrot fiber wants to hold it in. So, all right. So a couple just basic things. We've got the 7 steps or portions of a smoke. The number one, and this is more of a commercial thing, you guys probably won't run into this much at home, but you want to condition all product to a similar warmer temp and surface moisture content. So a lot of times when a commercial person is doing something, they're stuffing, they've got huge amounts. Some of it goes into the cooler, some of it goes right from stuffing into the smokehouse. So it's not all going to be the same temperature. They will run what they call a conditioning step. It is usually 140 degrees with 40% relative humidity, and they'll do that for 20 minutes. That just sets everything to basically the same condition for heat and relative humidity. Then they go back to their beginning and start from there. The next thing that you should do, and all of our smoke schedules at this point should include this for you, and that's a drying stage. Drying stages can run from as short as 10 to 20 minutes on a snack stick up to 30, 45 minutes for larger diameter sausage. What we're trying to do here is get a certain amount of tackiness or dryness to the outside of the meat product. If your sausage, or really anything, is too wet or too dry, it's not gonna accept smoke well. Also, you don't want the relative humidity in your smoker to be too much. What you can wind up with if that happens is a streaky appearance. And that'll be because things start adhering and then the moisture buildup happens and it runs down, so you get streaks on your summer sausage snack stick. Now that is more common with a liquid smoke application, but it absolutely can happen with natural hardwood smoke as well. So third is apply smoke. This is where we want to start adding smoke to the product. While we're doing the first stage, for sure, if you're doing conditioning stage, you don't want to add it. Or you're doing a dry stage, I don't recommend adding it. I just start once I start smoking, which is stage 2 or 3, depending on how you're doing it. Meat is not going to accept smoke outside of 90, or it's either 90 or 80 degrees, 90 to 140. In that range, it'll accept smoke. Before, it won't. After, it won't as well. And I think sometimes that gets people a little bit confused when we say between 90 and 140 degrees. We're not talking about the temperature of the air inside your smoker. We're talking about the surface temperature of your meat. Now, another quick thing, smoke ring isn't really a smoke ring. I mean, it is, but it's not like smoke is penetrating your sausage up to a certain degree. It's actually a cure ring. The smoke is curing the outside of your meat at a greater rate than, you know, the center of it. And I can prove that by taking a brisket or anything I want, putting in some sodium nitrite, letting it sit in that overnight, and then cooking it in a sous vide cooker or an oven, never near any smoke, and you'll get a cure ring or smoke ring from it. So just, I know everybody likes, oh, I got this huge smoke ring on it, but yeah, to each their own. All right, so stage 4, after we've applied smoke, after we're added as much smoke as we want, we're gonna turn the smoke off, and then we're gonna start a cooking process. So we're gonna heat and denature the surface proteins, and this is what's gonna set that color in, as long as we've used a nitrite, which we're smoking. So unless we're doing a whole muscle thing like a brisket or a pork butt, we definitely should have used. The next step is increase temp and relative humidity. The next step is further increase temp and relative humidity. We want to cook things up in stages here. Usually we say go from 120 to 140 to 160 to 175. There are obviously some ones that are a little bit different, but that is a good standard. So 120, 140, 160, 175. There's a couple reasons that we do that. We like to start at 120 because we want to get within 20-ish degrees of what the animal's living temperature was. Say that again, maybe a little bit different way. If we were to cook a pig, which runs around 99 to 100 something degrees, we want to start at 120 because that's what the animal's temperature was when it's alive. We want to do this because doing this doesn't overstress the proteins. I mean, if you think about it, that does make sense. That is what that protein was used to being at. So leaving it in that range is going to help it out. The other reason is something we've talked about ad nauseum here, and that is case hardening. Want to avoid that at all costs with sausage because it can ruin your entire batch, and there's not a ton you can do after that. Once case hardening is set in, you're looking at pulling it, finishing up in water, but you'd also have to cut it into smaller pieces so that the heat can get in through the sides. So, and then the last step is shower or ice bath if appropriate. So for those of you with commercial smokehouses or some way to do this, interestingly enough, showering on for a minute, off for 2 minutes with air blowing over it, on for a minute, off for a minute, and then back and forth, will actually cool it down as quick, if not quicker, as if you just take the entire thing and submerge it in an ice bath. Reason for that is the exact same reason as the stall. As you're showering and it's getting wet outside, you blow air, it aids in evaporation, and that evaporation energy is pulling out more heat than it just sitting in an ice bath. It's crazy, but we've seen it happen. So, and then a couple of tips for cooling, so there's something called Appendix A. We talk about it occasionally on Meatgistics. We're a little bit leery of oversharing because it can give people a little bit of a false sense of security. If you've seen it before, you may have noticed that Once you get to like 157 degrees, the time to reach a 7 log of lethality, which is what you want to do, is seconds. It is not long. But on the other end of that, there's Appendix B. Appendix B deals with rapidly cooling product to make sure that it's safe. So for uncured meats, you have to go from 130 to 80 degrees in 1.5 hours. So if a commercial processor is doing bacons, they have 1.5 hours to get that bacon from an internal temp of 130 to an internal temp of 80. They then have an additional 5 hours to get it from 80 to 40. So this is where blast chillers come in, showers, ice baths, things like that. But for a large commercial operation, blast chillers are pretty much what they do. I was lucky enough to go on a tour of Hormel bacon plant here in Wichita. I know the plant manager and took me through. Their chillers are enormous. I mean, just absolutely huge, size of my house, basically. And they just roll bacon in, let them sit in there for however long, move it to the next one, move it to the next one. Yeah, pretty awesome. But then for cured meats, it's a little bit different. You have a little bit more time, which makes sense because we've added cure here. You have 5 hours to get it from 130 down to 80, and then you've got 10 hours to get it from 80 to 45. So you can be a little bit more lax in how quickly you get it down there. All right, so going with a basic smoke schedule, we're gonna go over, let me check the chat again, just see if anyone's popped in with any questions. We'll never not use Sure-Gel for a smoked product going forward. Diesel Addiction says you need to go over a video using your smoker and go over its settings and features. Diesel, I assume you're talking about the PK100 because that's what we do most of our smoking on. If that is what you're talking about, I think we have something out there. But if not, yeah, absolutely, we can go ahead and get that done for sure. All right. Oh no, where did I go? Sorry about that. A couple more just natural, if you're using natural wood to smoke. They say to use a hardwood and they say to use it moist. I know that's going to start all sorts of problems. I've read really interesting studies that show that it makes literally no difference whether you're using a pan of sawdust and you add water to it or not. I can say from anecdotal evidence, adding water does seem to make the smoke last longer. I've seen studies that seem 100% legit that say that that's not true. Maybe we need to run a side-by-side, but we would need 2 PK100s for that because how long it's going to smoke has so much to do with outside influences. It's the smoker that you're using, it's the relative humidity and the heat of the day outside. It's time of year, obviously, what type of chips you're using. So there is a lot that goes into it. I will just tell you that when I do this, I do add water to my smoke chips. And then product should be in the range, and this is definitely disputed. Product should be in the range of 50 degrees when it goes into the smoker. Nothing of mine will ever get to 50 degrees unless it's like a steak before it gets into the smoker. Any sausage I have is going to be 40 something, low 40s. I'm just not going to let it sit around that long at room temperatures to get up to 50 degrees. A commercial processor might do it a little bit differently, and if they were somewhere around that, or if they were outside of that, low or high, they would probably run that conditioning step. This one should be obvious, but make sure all of your equipment is clean. With smokers, that can be a fire hazard, and it can also make your meat not taste as good. Or I've seen the inside of some smokers that are just disgusting with stuff flaking off. So it's not necessarily unsafe to eat, but unpleasant to eat. And the last one is air supply, and not the I'm all out of love, not that air supply. you want to get good control over your dampers. On most smokers, you're going to have either 1 or 2, in some cases 3 dampers low and 1 up top. What that's going to do is draw air in through the bottom, funnel it up through the top. It's going to keep the air moving, which is going to keep some of the heat moving. It's going to help mitigate hot and cold spots, but every smoker is different. Some are going to have more hot and cold spots than others. We are lucky enough to have the PK100. It's incredibly well insulated. It has very few hot or cold spots. One of the things that very few people take into consideration when they're loading their smoker is how you load it. If you were doing a commercial smokehouse and you were running something less than a full smoker, you would want to position it right dead in the middle or all the way off to one side. What you wouldn't want to do is split those. Like you wouldn't want to do half on this side, half of this side, and leave the middle completely open, because that's going to make the airflow weird. So some will get a lot more air than others. The best thing I can tell you is spread out your stuff evenly, or just run a full smoker, and that's the easiest way to do it. We had a question the other day from somebody who was wanting to know about rotating their snack sticks. So they had a vertical smoker, and they were noticing that the bottoms were cooking quicker than the top, which to a certain degree makes sense. It's closer to the heating coil or the heat source, whatever it might be. What he was wanting to do was to, at some point halfway through the cook, cut them and hang them over again. I hope that makes sense. So when you're smoking, you've got your smoke stick here that's holding the product. Loop it up and over like this. So his bottoms were cooking quicker than his tops. So what he was planning on doing was tying his bottoms, then about halfway through, I think, cutting it here and looping it again to kind of try to mitigate some of it being that close to the heating coil the entire time. I mean, you do the best with what you can. Ideally, you would have a smoker which wouldn't have that problem, but I mean, you know, we all have to work with the tools that we've been given. Another thing with air supply, that initial drying phase where you have the dampers wide open because we're trying to get it to pull a bunch of air off, if you leave that on for too long, you can really mess up your smoke. Like we said already, it's not going to accept smoke if it's too dry, so you need some moisture. What I normally tell people to do is stage 1, if we're doing a drying stage, which we should, is going to be dampers open, no smoke. Stage 2, we're going to close it down to about 2/3 of the way, and we're going to add smoke and humidity. So just add those two things at once. You might not get much of the benefit from the smoke or the humidity even right away at those lower temperatures, but it will help. All right, and these are, I wanted to call out, I have 2 different snack stick recipes here. They're an interesting difference, and they're the same basically. So we got our drying phase of 10 minutes to begin with. It's a 110 degree dry bulb and a 100 degree wet bulb, which is giving us a 70% relative humidity. Then one of them has another 30-minute drying phase and the other one goes straight to cooking. I will tell you the one that I use has a 20-minute initial drying phase, and then I go right to smoking. I don't see a reason to dry more than 20 minutes on a snack stick. Summer sausage, yeah, I might do 30, 40, something like that, but a snack stick doesn't have enough water in it to make that necessary, at least from a home processor standpoint. A commercial guy might have to do things a little bit differently. There are things like HACCP plans that they have to abide by, which HACCP is how they prove their product is safe through process instead of through testing. But okay, so we have first phase is 110 degrees for, we'll just say for 20 minutes. The next phase is natural smoke, and they have it for an hour at 130 degrees with a relative humidity of 47. They cook that until it is, nope, that's just time, sorry. So for an hour. They then put in another drying phase for 10 minutes for 145, or at 140 degrees with 0 relative humidity because it is a drying phase. That's a little picky in my mind. I would not tell a home user to run a second drying phase right before cooking. For a commercial processor, they're probably doing that to set that color in. Like we talked about before, they're trying to denature those proteins on the outside and get that color locked in. The reason they want that is because they're going to a 180 degree 180 degree dry bulb with 164 wet. So there's only 16 degrees difference between their dry bulb and their wet bulb, which gives them a very high relative humidity and possible streaking if they hadn't done that. Going on to summer sausage. So this one has a 40-minute drying phase in the beginning, which makes sense because, again, there's more water. It's a thicker product. It's going to take a little bit longer to draw enough water out from the edges and get that evaporated up off of the skin. They then go to a 90-minute smoke schedule, and they're running it at 130 degrees. So they start out at 110, 130, 145, and then 185. Now, let's pause here real quick and talk about what to do if your smoker doesn't start at below 150, say. What we have found, we've had good luck with, and there's a video on it of Meatgistics, is our oven back here. If we propped the lid and ran it at its lowest setting, we found that we could bleed 30 degrees of heat out of that and stabilize that top rack at just about exactly 120 degrees. All ovens are going to be a little bit different, but if your oven will do 150 degrees, I would recommend that you toss it in your oven before you move it to the smoker. This will help prevent a few problems, case hardening being one of them, lack of smoke adhesion being another. If you just start off right away at 150, I've seen some that won't start below 175. If you have a propane smoker, you might not be able to get it to start below 190. Our old Weston struggled at lower temperatures, so we would occasionally put pepperoni and summer sausage in the oven first if we were doing it through that. So that's just one thing you can do to avoid having to start it at too high of a temperature. Let me see. All right, for jerky, not something a lot of people think of as something they do in their smoker, but I would recommend that you do. And we do two different major types of jerky here at Walton's. One of them is standard jerky, and the other one is the tender jerky. Tender jerky is where we add 20% of the product's weight in sugar. So if we're doing 10 pounds of jerky, we're adding 2 pounds of sugar, brown sugar, and then 18% the product's weight in water. Vice versa? That might be vice versa. 18% in sugar and 20% in water. We then vacuum tumble that so that the meat picks up as much of that sugar as possible. That lets it stay nice and tender and flexible. It doesn't get as hard while still having a water activity low enough to be shelf stable. Jerky is, I don't think you can even call it jerky if its water activity is above a 0.85. We were able to make it nice and tender with a water activity, I think, of like 0.73, which is, I mean, we could leave that out at, I could leave this here and it would never grow mold on it. And it's, I mean, this is cold, but it's, you know, nice and moist and tender. It's great to chew. It's not hard. But yeah, If you're interested in that, go on over to Meatgistics and look up tender jerky. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm going to read you the regular jerky one first, and that is a 20-minute drying phase at 130 degrees, then a natural smoke for an hour and a half at 125 with a 96% humidity. And I'll make a post on this on Meatgistics, and I will list out these, so I hope no one's taking notes or anything. So that has a relative humidity of 35%. We then cook it, which means we stop the smoke for 90 minutes at 160 degrees until the internal temperature is 158. So that can take a while. I don't know why it has a time and an internal temperature. So when it has an internal temperature, that's, you cook it until it reaches that degree. And then they have a 30-minute drying phase at the end at 180 degrees, and that is key. You do want to do that. You can end up with a product without a low enough water activity if you don't run that final drying phase. Now, the tender jerky is quite a bit more in depth. We're going to run a 90-minute drying phase in the beginning, and that's going to be 110 degrees. We're having no relative humidity here. Then we're going to add a 5-minute smoking schedule at 135 degrees, a 25-minute smoking at 140, and then another 15 minutes at 145. So as you can see, I mean, quite a bit more detailed. All of those have 0 relative humidity. Then we're cooking it for 30 minutes at 150 degrees, then 30 minutes at 155. We're cooking it until its internal temperature actually gets all the way up to 165, and then we're running another drying phase at 150 degrees. Now, during those 3 cooking phases at the end, we are going to add humidity, which isn't something you would normally think of with jerky, but we're trying to get it up to a point where the cooking temperature has killed everything in that meat. So people who do a jerky in your dehydrator, even if your dehydrator gets up to like 160 degrees, you're running a risk of pulling too much water out of that product before you reach lethality. So heat needs moisture to kill bacteria. Just heat by itself at the temperatures we're talking about is not going to be enough to kill all that bacteria. It needs some moisture, some activity in that meat to really cook it, to get that bacteria dead. But yeah, and then it's the finish is a 10-minute 150 drying phase. If you're making tender jerky and you don't do that, you will end up with some tackiness. It's probably gonna have a little bit of tackiness anyways, but you'll end up with almost like pools on the outside of the meat of like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like really wet sugar. But yeah, running that final drying phase will definitely help out with that. I'm gonna pop over to chat to see if there are any questions. Okay, a few of them. Will this be available to watch? Yep, so Rebecca, yes. You can go back, these will all be on Walton's YouTube page. Which I will talk about something with that quickly at the end. Oh, Lynn's here. All right, so Diesel, yeah, he was talking about the PK100. Yep, absolutely, we can do that. We'll get a more updated video out there. It's been a while since we did anything really specific to the PK100, and we've evolved. We've done different things with it since then. So we'll go back through that. It might be a while till we can get it. So I will say this, for snack sticks, bologna, jerky, it's good with. It's going to be better than your regular average smoker. But snack sticks and bologna, it's incredible with. It's also great with cheese. It is a really good cold smoker. Hold on, I'm going to look for something. Especially if you combine it with this Flip Professional Smoke Box. So what I do is I put this, and I've even got it loaded with chips already. I put that all the way at the bottom underneath the drip pan down where the coil is. I light that with like just Cameron's fire starter underneath it. And then I put cheese or whatever I'm trying to cold smoke all the way at the top, open the top vent all the way, open the bottom vent just a little bit. Remember, more oxygen is going to mean more fire. We're trying to keep heat down, so we really want it to smolder more than we want it to burn. Because, yeah, obviously, the more flame, the higher it's going to raise the temperature in there. All right. Yep, Lynn Fletcher has the PK100. I don't know of anybody on Meatgistics who's unhappy with theirs. Yes, they're very expensive, but they're really, really, really well-built machines. Any advantage to using a low-volume fan to keep the heat more even? Yeah, absolutely. One of the great advantages, well, one of the two big advantages of our huge commercial smokehouse, we have a Pro Smoker 500T that we have in here for some testing on larger commercial batches or, you know, larger commercial batches. It has a dedicated fan and it can control its own relative humidity. I mean, that is really the biggest thing. When I'm doing something in the PK100, it's going to take probably 40% longer than it will in the commercial smokehouse if I'm not using my oversized water bowl and this aqua dry material. If I'm using those, it's probably closer to 10 to 20% longer, but the ability to manage the relative humidity in there really does speed up your smoke, gives you a better finished product. But I mean, there aren't many or any home smokers that are going to give you the ability to do that. I actually took our application specialist has these two probes that you set in a little bit apart, and it actually measures the difference in the dry air and the wet air and gives you your relative humidity. I was looking at a way to like atomize air and shoot it in from the bottom. Like we even thought of something simple like running a humidifier and piping it into the bottom. But that doesn't give you a way to control the humidity. It just gives you a way to add the humidity, which is what this is, which is great. I mean, it's absolutely better than nothing, but it is just like, oh, here, have some humidity, cook faster. It's not always what you want. Does the PK100 have programmable logic for multiple set stages for a smoking curve? So no, PK100, you have to go out and adjust everything manually. There's no remote connection at this point. There's no telling it, you know, in an hour, go ahead. That's another advantage of the large 500T that we have. But, you know, the 500T is the size of a, I don't know, it's almost the size of a queen bed. I mean, it is really, really big. You can roll a truck in there, like a food truck, not a truck. And it's just not reasonable for most home users. Rex says, what's the difference between pink salt and saltpeter? Not necessarily what we're talking about today, but I'm more than happy to answer that. So pink salt is cure number one, sure cure. It is sodium nitrite. It is 6.25%. The rest of that is salt. The reason that they make it the sodium nitrite such a small portion of that is A, sodium nitrite is very powerful, but it would be difficult to get that all mixed into a 25-pound batch. You know, 1 ounce of SureCure, which is the salt and sodium nitrite together, cures 25 pounds of ground meat. If you had just 0.625 of an ounce, that would be hard to make sure you have it all mixed in with meat. Plus, it being pink and a little bit larger in volume helps identify it. It reduces the chances of mistakes of someone thinking, oh, this is just salt. Nitrate poisoning is probably not a blast, I would imagine. And then saltpeter is something they don't really use anymore. Honestly, what it was, I believe it was a mix of nitrate and nitrite. So nitrate breaks down into nitrite, which then breaks down into nitric oxide, which is what actually gives you your curing powder or power. This is why when we're doing like slow cured stuff, or sometimes when we're doing like a dry aged, sometimes we're going to use something that has sodium nitrate and sodium nitrite. The nitrate is giving you the curing power right away. The nitrite is going to then break down into the nitrate is going to break down into the nitrite and then give curing power. So it has instant and long term. For anyone who wants to try something ridiculously good, go over to Meatgistics and look up Lynn Fletcher's smoked pecans. It was like, Lynn, post what it was. Something smoked pecans. They were unbelievable. He sent some in, and there was practically a fight here after the live stream was over about who was finishing them. They were so good. So Dave, yep, Instacure number 1 is just nitrite. Instacure number 2, which is far less available, is both. It's nitrate and the nitrite. Okay, so smoke schedules, we've really just talked about jerky and sausage, but obviously that's not all people smoke. You've got ribs, you've got pork butts, other large whole muscle cuts of meat. Definitely differing ways to do this. We still absolutely recommend that you step it up, but it is not as urgent. You don't need to be as careful with it. If I'm doing a pork butt, I'm usually going to run 190 degrees for 20 minutes, 210 for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to max out my smoker. That, you know, these are designed to smoke products. They're not a grill, so they're just going to go up to 225. And I'm just going to run it there until it's reached the desired internal temperature. Which for pork butts and brisket, for me, I like to go to 192 degrees. When you tell somebody that who doesn't know barbecue and doesn't really know smoked meats, it kind of freaks them out. They're like, why would you overcook it that much? Well, it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier with the myosin and the actin. Actin at 160 degrees is going to firm everything up. By going to 190 degrees, or even staying at like 175 for a couple of hours, we're allowing all of that connective tissue, all of that collagen, it's all going to melt and break down. That's why if you've ever held a nice piece of brisket, it folds over your finger. Or if you've ever pulled pork, if you do it well, you shouldn't even need a pork puller. You should just be able to reach in and mash it all up. It's all the bonds between the muscle fibers, all that connective tissue, all the collagen is gone. It's melted. So it just is ready to come apart. So for something like a pork butt, the recommendation from that we get from Pro Smoker for that smokehouse is 90 minutes at 140, then 30 minutes at 175, then 90 at 185, 90 at 195, and then all the way up at 215 until the internal temperature is 193. So it's basically the same. As a home processor, do you really want to be there doing that, constantly changing it remembering to go back in 10 minutes, remembering to go back in 30 minutes? I would recommend just an intermediate stage, somewhere in the 180 degree range, just so that you're not shocking those proteins really, really bad, and then getting it up to your temperature and going about your day. I mean, a pork butt is already an all day long event. Well, at least a 4 to 6 hours minimum. Why make it more difficult than that? Just make it as simple as you can. I was hoping, I brined a turkey, injected and brined a turkey last night, but didn't remember to throw it in the smoker as soon as I got here today. I was hoping that it would be ready so I could have it up here with me, but unfortunately, I don't know, keeping an eye out on our Instagram or something. I'm sure we'll snap some photos of it. We have more than enough turkey videos on Meatgistics, so I didn't feel the need to do another one of those. We've got using the Walton's Complete Turkey Cure. We've got the soluble turkey seasoning, and then maybe my favorite, we've got the dessert turkey. All of those are well done. At this time of the year, we get, well, we didn't really this year, but we usually get a bunch of turkeys. So one year when we had a ton, we were just looking for something different to do. We injected a turkey with the apple cinnamon marinade. Then we rubbed the outside with butter and the cinnamon toast shake from Excalibur, and it was awesome. Really, really good. If you're looking for something to do different on turkey this year, in fact, let me try and, I will get that real quick and just post it to the comments. And for anyone who joined us about halfway through, I recommend you go back up to the top. Tex77 has an auction going on right now to benefit the KGFA scholarship, and they've got some awesome stuff. So, all right, here is the link to dessert turkey. I like the turkey cure better. I just really like a cured turkey. It kind of gives it a hammy taste, and strangely, I like that more than ham, even though the number one thing I like about the turkey, the cured turkey, is that it tastes like ham. I still prefer the turkey over the ham. I don't know. I have weird taste buds. Dave says he usually does it in 3 to 4 stages. That's fine too. Barbecue specifically, with smoking, with sausage making, things like that, there's not quite as much, I don't know how to say this. People will die on a hill on barbecue. They're like, no, this is how you do it. This is the best way. You know, they'll fight to the death to defend their way. I don't know. I tend to think whatever works for you. I mean, everyone's got a different smoker. Everyone has a little bit different of a process. So just whatever works for you. Pecans. Yes. Awesome. I'll try and find that too, because those really were absolutely incredible. We get good things here from time to time that people send in, but that was absolutely out of this world. They were apple smoked cinnamon sugar pecans, and we meant to do it, but we forgot we were going to go grab vanilla ice cream, put these on it. Oh, that would have been so good. Let's see. All right. Yeah, Lynn, we would love it if you want to send those in. Absolutely. All right. So if you guys have any further questions, I'm going to start a post on this live stream just so I can post the smoke schedules. Hopefully make that a little bit more clear. I know just me saying it to you is not going to have the same effect as you actually looking at them. That will be probably far more useful. And then if you have any future topics you want us to discuss, go ahead and I will find a way to pin that live stream discussion board somewhere up on Meatgistics so it's easy to find, and just post it there and we will cover whatever we can. I will hang around for another couple minutes to see if there's any other questions. There's Uncle Josh. I have an electric smoker now for my sausage. What would be the best temps and step-ups in general for pepperoni beef snack sticks? So you're going to want to start low. A lot of electric smokers aren't going to go lower than 150. The PK starts 70 or something like that, but just a lot of them don't. So you've got a couple options there. You can either start it in your oven, if that'll start at 120. If not, you can either prop the door on your oven or prop the lid on your smoker. For either one of those though, you need a good way to measure the ambient temperature inside your smoker. Because just propping the lid, I can't guarantee that you're anywhere near 120 degrees. But yeah, so you want to go 120 degrees for snack sticks, say 20, 30 minutes. Then, and that's just a drying phase. So you want your bottom, if you have just one vent down there, if you have two vents, open, and your top open. So it's drawing air through the entire time and drying off the skin of that product. Then you want to close those down about 2/3 of the way, bump it to 140. At that point, I add smoke and humidity, and then jump it up in 20-degree stages every hour. So an hour at that 140, an hour at 160, and then at either 175 or 180 until the internal temperature of your stick. We say 160 because we know that means that it's safe. Some people do 155. If you're gonna dwell it, which dwelling is letting the meat continue to cook while it's not in with the heat source. So if you cook a summer sausage and the internal temperature says 155 and you pull it from that and you don't stick it right in an ice bath, it's gonna get up to 160. It's gonna naturally just keep cooking. But with snack sticks, summer sausage, any sausage like that, you should be taking it out of the heat and putting it into an ice bath or showering it. So you can also go to, let me post a link to the Meatgistics University cured sausage. Oh, that's one other thing I want to talk about. This is going to get its own video for sure, but it's something we've been doing here for a long time. It is something Parksider introduced us to 2 or 3 years ago, and that is not cooking in your smoker the whole time. So the longest period for most smokes on a sausage is going to be from 130 degrees to your done point. We're running into the stall. It's harder to get the temperature up once you get higher. So what he recommended and what we've done a lot now is pulling it out of the smoker at 130 degrees and finishing it up in water. Now he does a turkey fryer and a big pot of water, and he doesn't even put it in a bowl, or sorry, a bag, like a vac bag or anything. He just puts it right in with the water. I couldn't believe him. I was sure that that was gonna waterlog it and remove some of the smoke flavor, but I've done all sorts of products like that, and it does neither of those things. It does speed your cook up unbelievably. From 130 to 160, very rarely is it more than an hour, and I just set my sous vide cooker to 180 degrees. Now, if you're using a sous vide cooker that sucks water in and then heats it and injects it back out, I do recommend you use a vacuum bag because you might get some fat, some little pieces of the casing or the meat pulled in and clog your filter. If you're using one like the Weston, like I know Papa Sop has, that's got a little blade on the bottom that keeps the water moving and heating coils. So you don't even need to use a bag for that. You just put it right in the water. Awesome way to shorten up your cook times. Unfortunately, not going to work with you know, a brisket or a pork butt unless you vac bag those. If you do vac bag them, it works incredibly well. The best briskets I've ever made, smoked until they were, I think, 145, pulled sous vide at 195 degrees overnight. Like I just went home and left it running here, came back in the next morning, put it in the fridge for 12 hours, or no, 24 hours, didn't let anyone touch it until the next day. Reheated it up in the oven and it was incredible. We had everyone raving about that, so. Hot water all the way, absolutely. Yep, sticks sealed or unsealed, amazingly, it doesn't make a difference. The only thing I would say again is just make sure that if you're using a circulator, one that has a filter, you don't want to put product in there that might release fat or little bits of the casing into that. All right, cool. So Uncle Josh 1 Ton Fishing Club can start at 110. So you're perfect, man. Just go all the way in there. I will get that real quick posted. I'm just looking for the smoke schedule for snack sticks. I'll post that one. All right, so I'm posting a link, Josh, so you can just go right there, and there's a smoke schedule there for you. Awesome. Thanks, guys. These hopefully are a lot of fun for you. I'm enjoying it. It does help reinforce things in my mind when I know I'm going to have to be talking about these things. I definitely brush up on notes, look for ideas. So, yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying them. I certainly am. Yep, Sean Simpson says, what about using a roasting pan? Yep, absolutely. People do that. Advantage of that is they tend to be longer, not very deep, so it's kind of easier to get the water up to that temperature. And if you're doing it in like a pot or something small, you have to cut your snack sticks up to pretty small. With a roasting pan, you can leave them a good deal longer. So it looks like no other questions, but I think you guys are a little bit behind me. There's a delay, so I'll just wait. So these are taco snack stick seasoning that I found and had totally forgotten about. I put it in a blast freezer that I don't normally use. Man, the taco is really, really good. We made one huge mistake with this though. We used the hot pepper cheese when we absolutely should have used the cheddar. These would be incredible with cheddar. So if you're looking for something cool to try, the taco snack stick seasoning and add either cheddar or even better would be ghost pepper. So, all right, thanks guys.